Emma from Outside the Bubble, and I am joined with Marty from Morris Palmer, and today we're going to be talking about the evolving roles of the accountant and accountant avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And do you do that?
I know some of my clients might.
So who's avoiding you?
Not many.
Okay.
And maybe that's the point, isn't it? That if you've got a good relationship with your accountant, then you don't need to avoid them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it comes back to finding the right accountant.
Yes, absolutely.
And being comfortable with them, being happy to contact them, good reasons, bad reasons, or, anything that comes up. And just having that confidence that they're not going to judge you, they're just going to help you.
Yeah.
And just building on that relationship, really. And then you don't need to avoid your accountant.
You don't. I do see it all the time with clients. Clients generally do have that, I avoid telling my accountant stuff because I might get into trouble.
Yeah, and a bit embarrassed, maybe, I sometimes think. Maybe they're a bit embarrassed that they haven't made the best decision, or they've done something, perhaps sometimes without actually talking to the accountant before. And then it's like, well, actually, if I just avoid them, I don't have to confess that we've done this thing, which might not be that bad anyway.
It is almost like the business equivalent of confessional. Like you get to the end of the year and you're like, I've done all of this shameful stuff. Don't judge me, but please just put my accounts through and say very little better. And let me just scoot off.
Yeah, exactly. And, to be fair, I don't think anyone should feel like that, should they? They should be able to approach their accountant about absolutely anything, not avoid them.
I definitely see an underutilisation of my clients and their accountants.
Yeah.
So for some of my clients, they see it as a very transactional relationship. It is they do my year-end accounts, they do my tax, they may do my payroll, and it's a very functional relationship. And there is nothing more to it than that. And then you have people that are like, I speak to my accountant about everything. And I'm like, great. That just feels very mature and very healthy. And I like the fact that you're, having your own kind of comfort blanket. And it is really funny how the accountant is viewed either as that thing that's really helpful and supportive, or that thing that is to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think also in a way that the evolving role of the accountant, as you said, is the modern role of the accountant is to help advise, support your business. And it's changed so much, I think, hasn't it, the role of an accountant? It was very much, in my mind anyway, very much a past thing. You were always looking back at what had happened. And now with the evolving role, it's much more about looking forwards, the planning, the cash flow, and where is the business going rather than where's it been, which is relevant, but in a way less relevant than where it's going, isn't it? So it's all of that kind of evolvement with accountancy, which I think now the accountancy softwares that are available are so good at helping. Well, they're kind of good at helping accountants help their clients.
Yes.
Because we can just see what's going on. And I know a lot of my time at the moment is spent helping clients get onto an accounting software. So that's a huge part of what we're doing really at the moment, actually.
I mean, I know we'll come on to technology, but I think just when you think about the accountant, I know I say it to everybody. People often say to me, you don't really act like an accountant. And I think it is because in my mind, they're just picturing, A Christmas Carol and Ebenezer Scrooge sat there with big ledgers, being stingy and being quite mean and quite stern. Yeah. And actually, I think there probably are those types still out there. But I think that is I think we're in a transitional period, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I can talk from my own experience. Obviously, I took over Morris Palmer from an older male who had built up clients who were probably of a similar age and they'd kind of grown up together. So when he left, Martin, my predecessor, he was 63 and I took over when I was 35. Yeah. So actually to go from a 63-year-old male to a 35-year-old woman is a huge difference.
I was going to say, you must have encountered some challenges along the way.
Yeah, 100%, because there's a certain judgment on who you are and what they think they're going to get from you because of what sex you are, because of what age you are, regardless of experience, to be honest. I mean, I've been an accountant for 20 years and I think I've got a huge amount of experience. I know I can offer a huge amount to my clients, but when people don't know me and they just see me, particularly more so when I sort of took over, they're going to, well, what can she offer? surely someone older and maybe a man is going to have a lot more experience.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's necessarily the case. And in fact, actually fresh blood, so to speak, you have a different view on things. You moving with technology, which unfortunately, a lot of older people aren't able to move with technology in that way. So I'd like to think now that I can bring a lot to the table. But I know when I took over, I questioned myself at times and thought, can I bring enough? Am I good enough to do this?
I have a similar experience, actually. Sometimes when, especially if I'm going to go into a business and take on the role of fractional FD, or I'm just going in to just evaluate what they've got. So quite a lot of the times I will have clients come to me and go, we're not sure our accounts department's right, but we don't know why it's not. Can you come in and help us potentially redevelop it, mentor people that are already in it, or just tell us what we're doing, that isn't quite right. And when you go into those businesses, there is some apprehension about, actually, do you know what you're doing? How do I trust what you're doing? How do you know that have you ever used my software? That's a big thing. Have you ever used my software? And I have to kindly say, well, accounting hasn't changed for 2 millennia. The fundamental practices are the same, whether I was accounting, today or in the 70s or in the 1900s. The principles really do not change. The way we might go about it has, but fundamentally, when you're in different pieces of software, you're just trying to find where the things live and how they speak to each other. It's nothing more, substantial than that. And actually, that's the one thing that I don't worry about when I go into a new client, is actually what software they've got.
No, it's funny.
It's all the other stuff that you find along the way. Exactly.
So do clients just take that? Do they go, oh, okay, that's fair enough?
I think when they think about it, they go, yes. Oh, actually, I do get that. I do understand that actually we're talking about the same things, but just slightly differently. And, where you might find one thing, it might be hidden in a different place. Yeah. But ultimately, it's debits and credits. They've got to balance.
Same fundamentals.
Exactly. There's nothing more to it. But I think back to your earlier point of, accountants were traditionally, looking back at the past, well, this is what's done. I actually think that is changing. And I think even internal finance departments within businesses need to make that transition where they actually need to understand the data they're producing and actually be able to tell the story. Something I talk about all the time for accounts departments, especially if they're going to board meetings or they're going to go to senior leadership meetings and discuss, how they've performed, is actually you have to tell a story. You have to bring the numbers to life. It's no good just saying, these are the numbers. Well, what do they mean? What are they telling us? And even things like, the one thing I try and instill in my clients is that they produce a balance sheet as part of their management accounts packs, but they also then produce a ratios tab where they actually have graphics so that people that aren't necessarily number-based people can look at it and go, oh, that chart's going up. We need to do something about that. That shouldn't be going up. It should be going down.
It's the visuals, isn't it? And seeing it in different ways, I suppose.
And I think it's helping people. And I think when you do a technical job like us, we do sometimes go down the rabbit hole of the detail and go, oh my God, this is really exciting. This is really nerdy. We've got to go and do this.
But not everyone is
everyone's as excited as us, sadly.
I'm always mind blown by that.
And so actually a lot of my job is about, how do I make this user friendly? How do I sit in the shoes of someone that doesn't know what I know and be able to say, am I safe? Am I not safe? Can I invest? Can I not invest? Do I have to cut my cloth? Do I have to sell more? Do I have to raise my prices? And I think that's where the evolution of the accounts role is going to go, because you're right, the technology is improving.
It is, so much so. I mean, it basically does the job that an accountant used to do, doesn't it? You need an accountant to verify that, because obviously it's down to whoever's input the data. But in terms of pretty much producing a set of accounts, you're not a huge way off from doing that with a click of a button. So, what does an accountant offer going forwards? Well, it has to be, as you say, more of like a consultant business advice.
Yeah, it has to be more holistic.
Taking the business forward, looking at areas in the business that maybe aren't performing as well as they could be. I mean, sometimes we even, I see with my clients, something simple like they've got a finance team, but there's one member of staff who isn't quite maybe not pulling their weight, but isn't working in the right way within the team. So it can sometimes just be helping them identify a problem and then work out how to solve it, which I guess is what you do when you go into these.
Yeah.
So it kind of steps on what you're doing. But even as an accountant, by having that regular communication with a client, you can definitely pick up on bits that aren't quite right within the team, within the business, whatever it may be, and just try and point them in the right direction with those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before it needs someone like you to go in and completely kind of
Exactly. And I think it's really interesting because actually, and this is just completely anecdotal, there's no science behind what I'm about to say, but I generally find finance people kind of fall into two fields. They fall into the field of, I just want to do this processing and I am not interested in whether it's good, bad or ugly. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to hit my deadlines. I'm going to do what I'm told and I'm going to produce it and it's going to be accurate and that's it. You've got nothing more. Yeah. And then you have, I think, the next level up, which is I'm curious. Where does that go? What is that telling us? Is that right? Should I be concerned about that?
It's quite hard to find that.
And that is really hard to find because I think lots of people are attracted to accountancy because it is quite safe.
Yeah.
It is quite, people that really like routine as well because, try changing an accounts person's daily rituals. I think you've got better chance, moving the Eiffel Tower.
When you go into somewhere and you're looking at a finance team and you can see what's wrong. Yeah. And you've got to go, right, we've got to change, do this, whatever needs doing. I can imagine you get quite a lot of resistance.
Sometimes, absolutely. And there are some phrases that do give me the ick. Yeah. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, oh my God.
Is that from like the bosses or the...
No, sometimes they can be, the characters, I guess, I love the most is like, look, I was doing accounts before you were born. And let me tell you, no one's ever said there's anything wrong with how I do stuff. And it's like, I actually haven't said there's anything wrong with how you do stuff. But maybe we can do things in a more efficient way. Yeah. And,
I think people take that very personally.
Yes, because they see it as a criticism.
Yeah, exactly. It's just there is a better way. And it just needs a third party sometimes to come in and see that, doesn't it? Yeah. A new approach to it. But I think that's the problem, isn't it? It's that personal criticism or that it's taken as that.
But I also think that's where some of the disconnect comes from with people not wanting to talk to their accountant, because if they've got that type that are almost immovable objects, and then you've got this energetic, creative, idea generating machine of an entrepreneur, they just kind of look at that and go, oh, Christ, you're meant to be helping me, not the other way around. So I think sometimes that's where there can be some, bad representation of what accountants can be, because I'm sure everybody has met that type somewhere along the way, and they do exist. But I actually think as technology modernizes, as the demands of businesses get greater and the introduction of automation, and I don't know what AI is going to do in the accounting world, but automation is definitely taking out some of those entry level jobs.
Yeah, the data inputting type role, isn't
exactly.
it? AI will undoubtedly replace that aspect of it.
And you see it now where, you can create duplications of invoices without even having to do anything. That's happening right now. Yeah. And I do wonder actually how people progress in the accounting field, just because, when I left school, I cut my teeth on having to print invoices, stamp them, write them, get them signed out, And so when young people are coming through that, again, were born in the digital era, they're like, you want me to do what?
You want me to work hard?
Sorry, you want me to print paper? Sure. And I think this is one of the joys of working with young people, because there's this one individual that I can think of that's like, there must be an app for that. That can't be a real job.
That's the approach, isn't it? It must be an app.
I'll tell you what, I'll find it. I'll spend half a day finding the technology so I don't have to do this. I'm like, that's bloody brilliant.
I was going to say, what a great idea. Though.
Exactly. And I think that's where sometimes it's really interesting going into different accounts departments. And what is that mix? What does it look like? Yeah. Because you also then find people that have just been thrown into an accounts job because, they've got a bit of now, so they'll work it out. And actually, they're just doing processes and they have no idea what they're doing, but they know how to do the process.
Yeah. Just going back to AI, actually, one thing I've seen and thought about is that you have a finance team and you've had someone that's been doing the same thing years and years, there's no problem, doing well, good job. The thought of AI and what that means, I think it holds them back sometimes from using technology because the fear of, hang on, will I still have a job?
Yeah, that kind of protectionism.
Yeah, protection, yeah. And I think, I have seen that in a number of larger clients where they're still quite manual, might have a software, but they're doing things in quite a manual way with it. And straight away there's quicker ways to do it.
Yeah.
But the key person isn't pushing for that.
No.
It's got to be job protection, I suppose, to a certain extent.
And I think it comes back to that, if you give somebody X amount of hours to do X amount of jobs, they will just make it fit.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think sometimes we get stuck in that position of could we do more with less? And that comes back to that protectionist thing. But actually it's like, wouldn't you want to do more interesting stuff?
Exactly that, yeah.
Isn't there things that interest you? Because surely, counting the petty cash every month cannot be bringing you joy.
Yeah, exactly. We moved someone onto Xero a little while ago, a few months ago really, and they were using, I can't actually think what the system was, but it was a very old convoluted system. Very sort of manual based within the system.
Yeah.
You couldn't post journals or there's so much you couldn't do with it. It was a nightmare. And there were always a lot of mistakes in it, just because it was so hard to actually work out what to do.
Yeah.
Moved them onto Xero, and the lady that's doing it, she just sort of said to me, like, I can't believe how much less time I'm spending on it.
Yeah.
Now. The amount of time it has saved just from moving on to something like that and just automating a lot of the processes.
And even things like sheer space that you need.
Yeah, exactly.
You walk into some offices and they're wall to wall with these arch lever folders going back to the 80s sometimes.
Be scanned in.
And that exactly, it can be dragged, it can be dropped.
Exactly.
You can actually go and find it. You don't have to go into a lock-up room.
We love that from a sort of accounts preparation point of view, because obviously we have an office, and over, in the past, clients have dropped their records in. So we have a box of lever arch files and records for a client. We have another one there, and you walk in and there were records everywhere.
And the thing you need will not be in the box that it should be in either.
Exactly. Nothing's in order or whatever. And I remember going back to when I first started, there was paper everywhere in the offices. They were a bit of a fire safety hazard probably. But now there's so few records that come in. And actually, when we come to do an accountancy job on something like one of these accountancy softwares, and we want to know what an invoice is, we click on it, it's there. It's amazing. It's so good.
Yeah.
And that paper is now not being stored somewhere.
I know when
brilliant.
I started my business and you recommended Xero to me, it was just like the best piece of advice ever, because having worked with lots of different packages, I was just like, oh, this is so easy.
It's so easy.
This is so lovely. Exactly. And it's intuitive. That's a perfect word to describe in Xero, because I'm a big fan of it.
Ironically, QuickBooks is QuickBooks Intuit.
Yes.
I think it's nothing. It's not intuitive.
Interestingly, and again, obviously this is not sponsored by any of the accounting packages out there. But interestingly, everybody I know that does use QuickBooks hates QuickBooks.
Yeah.
And
there's so many moves from QuickBooks to Xero.
And there's almost like this rivalry of, is it QuickBooks or is it Xero? And, I suppose if you are watching this and you're unsure, it is Xero. There is no other answer. And that's the one thing we'll be quite firm about.
Well, I said that to Emma in the first place. So.
Yeah. And I took the advice, and my accounts are lovely. Marty's just signed them off.
Very good. Very good. Top marks.
Thank you. But interestingly, talking about, technology and software packages, this is something that there's a few things that I have to say on this subject, is how badly those implementation projects can go really, really wrong.
Really badly.
Really wrong. And so I do hear and I do feel the trepidation in owner managers when you say, this program really needs to move, and they're almost like, do anything else to my business, but don't make me move accounting packages. Please don't do it. And actually, for a lot of my clients, I have ripped things out and put new things in and replaced them with different packages. And I do think Xero is great. But I also think SAP B1 is really good.
Yeah, especially I use that. I only to pull information out.
Yeah, but I think if you're in a manufacturing, if you're in a distribution business, or if you're in something where you've got a lot of volume-based products, the inventory management system in it is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think what sometimes happens is that, my general observations are the project always seems to land with the finance person. And for me, depending on the type of finance person you've got really does depend on how well that project is going to go.
Yeah.
Because
And
if
a finance person might not always be an IT. They're not an IT specialist.
No.
Or then you need
exactly
some of that.
And
knowledge.
also, if they're not a visionary either, so many times I've seen a business move from one package to the other, and they've literally recreated the old package in the new package.
Yeah, and not thought about how can we do it better.
Exactly. There's no sitting there and going, actually, let's start at the very end of the journey, right? How do we want our management accounts packs to be presented?
Yeah.
How are we going to measure things in our business, and how do we see that as an end result, and then work backwards?
Yeah. I think, like you say about the visionary, it's really important, because otherwise you're just going to replicate bad onto something new, aren't you, basically, and have something else like
exactly. And there's a great saying, you put shit in, you're going to get shit out.
that. Very true.
You know, and I think people misunderstand actually how much is involved in moving packages, because I also think it's a really great time to declutter as well. So if you've got, you know, archived product numbers, archived customers, suppliers, GL codes that was something very specific, you know.
You don't need all of that.
You don't need all of that. Exactly.
No,
it's a whole new dawn.
Yeah, exactly. It's a new opportunity, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think sometimes if you're thinking about changing the IT package, you actually have to talk to the finance department and go to them, is the finance department the right people to actually lead some of these conversations? Because quite a lot of the time, I see this, you know, one of the joys of moving packages is you can recreate the chart of accounts.
Yeah.
And you can make that as expansive or as concise as your business needs it to be. And if you give that to somebody that is not visionary, someone that doesn't want to do the project, they will just create the same set of chart accounts.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when they go to the new system, they'll know where everything is.
Yeah, exactly that. I can use the same code.
Exactly. Everything's going to be the same, but in something different. And then you almost want to say, so what is the benefit of doing this? So sometimes I do get the impression that owners are like, well, it's an accounts package, so the accounts department are the rightful owners of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's not necessarily always true.
Or at least maybe needs to be overseen or have input from someone else. Probably.
Exactly.
It's a bit of a collaboration, I would think.
Exactly. And also, how do the other departments work with it as well? Because I think sometimes that gets forgotten about, like, how do other people interact with the accounts department? And how can you, you know, create automation between those departments too? So I see that happen quite a lot, and I actually see lots of money get wasted because actually they decide that they're going to move to a package. They haven't investigated it, but they haven't done a scope for themselves. Like, what is it we need? What is it we want our data to do?
Yeah.
So I see so many projects go wrong.
Yeah.
I see a lot of money get wasted, and then they end up with an end result that they're not happy with either.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not a good place to be in when you put all that time and effort into moving to something. And if it's done well, it can be so beneficial.
Yeah.
Such a saving for a business in terms of labour. You know, that's the thing I see most, is just the complete reduction in your labour time.
Yes.
Spent on doing just that sort of basic bookkeeping element of it.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, it should free that person up to think a bit more, to do other tasks, which are more meaningful and more beneficial for the company.
Because every finance department has that project that never gets done. There's always that project.
For a quiet day.
Exactly. when it's not audit or month. Maybe
exactly.
week 3 of
And
the
that
calendar
time
month.
never comes.
No. And I think that's also interesting, that it, like you said, it is interesting when you introduce these new ideas to the finance team, how many of them are just like eager beavers, and the rest of them are like, well, if we just keep doing our work and make excuses, this will never happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's that fear change, isn't it?
It really is.
We do see that a lot, I think. And as you say, often the business owner is an entrepreneur. They love change. They love ideas. You know, they love all of that. But the people working for them who are implementing everything don't necessarily like change. And people in general don't often like change. But I think it's often how it's kind of put to them. So maybe it's not always put across in the right way.
Yeah, sometimes it's not sold right.
Not sold right. Yeah, exactly. They're just seeing it as change, and they're not understanding the benefits that change is actually going to bring to them.
And I know we've spoken a lot about, you know, how accounts people have to evolve into speaking human.
Yeah.
But equally, I think there is a lesson to be learnt for entrepreneurs equally, that if accounts people were natural entrepreneurs, they wouldn't be sat in your offices plugging away and putting data into your system.
That's true.
So there has to be also, I think, a give and take in that relationship, that actually you might have some people in your business that aren't pro change and actually like things to stay the same.
Could be a little bit understanding.
And there has to be, I think just a little give, not too much, so that it gets taken advantage of.
I get that, babe. A little bit of understanding, even if it's just the way things are approached, a little bit more sensitively, perhaps than chucking something at people and saying this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's the way it's put across to people, isn't it?
Yeah. And my experience of entrepreneurs is they're incredibly creative individuals. They're very ideas driven. They're very strategic and, blue sky thinkers.
Yeah.
Yet they often lack the detail. And I think also when you're dealing with finance people, they're all about the detail.
Yeah, exactly. You have got two ends of it.
Exactly. And I think it's about finding that, you just saying, pick a new accounts package, saying that to some finance people are like, well, what? What do you need? I need all this data before I can even think about that.
Yeah.
So I see that mismatch quite a lot.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it would be interesting also when as more and more people, more and more businesses get onto accounting softwares, is the forecasting and that sort of aspect with it, because obviously it's very easy to bring your past data on there, but actually with Xero and things, the forecasting still isn't great on those. So it's still quite a manual aspect to forecasting. Yeah. And I suppose because actually forecasting in a software can only be produced based on what's happened.
Yes.
Other than, real information. So how do people actually start doing the forecasting, which is really important, using the software? I suppose that's where these apps are coming in quite useful. Have you used any of those?
I haven't, no, but I know some businesses that have used apps here and there to help them.
And they sort of integrate, don't they, with the software to do it?
Or you plug in the data and it goes, well, based on this is what should be happening.
And then I suppose you've then got to put your real-time information into it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, actually, in 4 months' time, I know we're going to invest in new computers for everyone or whatever it may be.
I definitely think it could help with things like the budgeting process because it's really interesting watching how different organisations go about the annual budget. There are some that it is just the finance department working in isolation, almost calling the shots. And it is a little bit like, oh, we're just going to grow by 5%. So everything just increases by 5%. And you're like, okay. And there's like no seasonality of the revenue line. So they're going to do 12 exact periods. And it's like, are you going to do this? And they're like, oh, no. It's like, so why are we changing this? And they're like,
have a good few months at this point of the year.
And I read
completely pointless exercise.
I read this really funny thing online the other day, which was people spend 3 months building a budget and 9 months explaining why it was wrong.
That's so true.
And I read that and I was like, yeah, that's absolutely fair.
Yeah, because I think people don't sort of learn by it, they don't evolve.
No,
it's all with it.
But I've got this one client and I absolutely love them. So what they did, they literally went to each department and said, right, apart from, utilities and all those things, tell us what it is that you want to spend money on. And you give us what you think your spending is going to be next year. And it's your responsibility to think of everything that you may or may not need. And so there, after a lot of, to-ing and fro-ing and backing and forthing, this information came back, it all got put into the budget. And interestingly, the overheads went down.
Okay.
So the finance department went, brilliant, love this. We're going with this. We're going to make more profit just by not spending as much. Yeah. And and then we get about 7 months in and departments have run out of budget.
Oh.
So the accounts department's like, you're going to have to wait 5 months. You've got no money. And they're like, well, we didn't know that it actually meant something.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I was just like, so what are you doing? They're like, no, they can't spend any more money.
Oh, really?
Well, they've got to think about it for next year now. It's just like, oh my goodness.
That's a brutal way of doing it.
Ruthless.
Yeah,
it's like, it's, and I said, I just have to ask, it's not, it's not hurting the business in terms of its growth and profitability, and we're not stunting growth just through theoretical, point scoring.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, not that we can see. And I was like, okay, fine,
fair enough.
that's new. But I think budgeting is. I think it's really important, but I think it's really difficult.
Really difficult. There's so many variables with it, aren't there? I think just so many variables.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, Oh, I mean, there isn't a perfect way to budget.
No.
And I definitely think beforehand it was always a bit of guesswork. But I think at the moment, especially with so much uncertainty and so many external factors, which now feels more prevalent than it's ever felt before, it makes everything anything could happen.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I mean, especially with the government at the moment, with do we get more taxes? Are we having less taxes? Is it good for business? Is it bad for business?
So much change, isn't there?
Employee rights, where is all of this going? I think people are just like, do you know what? Stuff it. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. So do you have any last words of wisdom on budgeting?
On budgeting, I think probably, if anything, given the economic climate of where we are at the moment, you've got to be a little prudent at the moment.
Yeah.
You've got to be a little bit cautious because, as you say, with uncertainty often comes some sort of negative changes. So if you're not sure which way to go, I would go a little bit more cautious at the moment.
And for people that do have some cash in the bank, where should they be investing in their businesses?
That's a good question. But I think normally the best investment is going to be in something that's going to produce more revenue. So whether it's better equipment, you know, if you're got quite old equipment and it's taking longer, so you've got quite a lot of labour with that, then automating more, potentially investing in the equipment, in machinery, might reduce labour too. So, but then it could be the other scale. It could be, okay, advertising. Do people know where you are? Do they know you're there? Do you have any kind of awareness of things? So two different sort of spectrums there, I suppose.
Yeah.
Both equally important in different ways.
Yeah, I also think training and development is also key at these times, especially when there's uncertainty. I think that makes employees feel like they've got security if they're being invested in. And I also think if it's a bit quiet at the moment and you've got some time in your business, this is the best time to reinvest in the people so that when things do change, they're ready to go and they're more prepared.
Your employees are as best as they can sort of possibly be, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's the evolution of accounts, people. You need to find commercially based people that love numbers, like, you know,
We're here.
we're here.